This morning, we are learning that the long-term plan at the southern border has 4 phases. That's what Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth revealed to Texas Congressman Tony Gonzalez. The representative on that and why Republicans in Congress are ceding authority to the president. Plus, fallout from Trump's trade war. Arlington Mayor Jim Ross invited us to City Hall to discuss which jobs in his city are most at risk and how much prices could rise because of it. Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson is defending her new bill to strengthen the border, but also has a warning for the thousands of Texans who depend on Medicaid. And remembering Sylvester Turner, who represented Texans at every level of government.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning, I'm Jason Whiteley. Let's begin with the top headlines happening across our state here. The city of Irving is making a move for the Dallas Mavericks. The city voted to rezone a massive new site just north of where the old Texas Stadium used to be, where the Cowboys played. The new owners of the Dallas Mavs own that property and are lobbying state lawmakers to open up casino gambling, potentially hoping to develop this land and move the Mavs to Irving. The Dallas Morning News with a lot more details on this. Senator Ted Cruz's Take It Down Act just got a powerful new push from First Lady Melania Trump. This is the bill that would make it illegal to share deep fake nude images of someone without their consent. A teenage girl from Aledo named Elliston Berry is behind the bill after a classmate did this to her. She sat by the First Lady during the president's address to Congress last week. The Senate passed the bill again. It is now waiting for votes in the House. And we are remembering Sylvester Turner this morning, who represented Texans at every level of government. Turner died Wednesday morning. He was just elected to Congress to replace the late Sheila Jackson Lee in Houston. Before that, Turner served as the mayor of Houston. He also spent almost 3 decades in the Texas legislature. He had been fighting bone cancer. Sylvester Turner there, 70 years old. Let's start this morning, though, with President Trump's trade war. The threat of tariffs, the very threat of them, has created anxiety for many families across Texas. San Antonio's Mayor Ron Nirenberg and Arlington's Mayor Jim Ross sent a letter to D.C. saying tariffs would put jobs in jeopardy here in our state. Our first guest is Arlington Mayor Jim Ross, who invited us to his office at City Hall. Mayor, thanks for having us here in Arlington.
Thank you for coming.
The letter you sent with Mayor Nirenberg from San Antonio, do you think that letter and the thousands of Texas auto workers helped influence this decision for the president to delay these tariffs for another month?
I don't know. I know that the big 3 auto manufacturers here went to the White House, had a visit with the president. Subsequent to that, there was a delay on the tariffs regarding the automotive industry. I think that probably had a greater influence than Mayor Nirenberg and I writing a letter to our congressman.
Did you hear back from anybody in Congress?
We have not.
You also said in your letter there is no time to take a wait-and-see attitude or grant the president the benefit of the doubt here. Do you still feel that way with the April 2nd tariffs looming on us?
Yeah, it's problematic. We have 5,200 auto workers here at the General Motors assembly plant here in Arlington. I'm certainly concerned with their livelihood. General Motors is a massive part of our community. They are engaged in our community on all fronts, and I'm concerned about what's going to happen to General Motors, to other assembly. I grew up in Detroit, I grew up in the auto industry. My father's retired from Chrysler. I'm concerned about what it's going to do to the auto industry, what it's going to do to the country as a whole.
In your gut, do you think these are going to happen, or is this just political posturing?
I think it's going to happen.
You think so?
I do. I pray it doesn't. But I think it's going to happen, at least for a period of time, for however long that is. I'm not sure. These are substantial things. Well, it's already happened to some extent. Tariffs have been implemented, and so I don't know. It's a lot of the uncertainty of what's happening with tariffs or executive orders or or on the immigration front. There's a lot. That uncertainty or the threat of it all is certainly problematic.
If these tariffs are enacted, how much could the price go up for a Chevy Tahoe or a Suburban or an Escalade? Any idea? Have you heard from?
Yeah, I've heard different expectations that it could be as little as $8,000 to $10,000 per vehicle, or as much as 15 to 20. That's a substantial increase in the cost of an SUV. But I'm certainly concerned about the citizens here in Arlington. I'm certainly concerned about their ability to afford to put food on the table, their ability to buy vehicles, their ability to put gas in those vehicles if they get them. And these tariffs are substantial. And then, Mexico and Canada are our closest allies. We've never had a tariff war with them like we're having now. I feel like we're picking a fight with our brother and sister.
Mayor, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's bring in the roundtable to talk about this. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I am Mitra with us from Austin at the Texas Tribune, and Bernadine Steptoe, political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Bud, the thing that strikes me is these auto workers are President Trump's base.
Well, these are President Trump's base. Also, the people who buy pickup trucks are his base. I mean, you look at the people who want to buy these GM or Ram trucks, they're going to go up from $70,000 to $77,000, $78,000 apiece. Those are Republican voters.
And at the end of the day, does the mere threat of these tariffs, like the mayor said, how much will that weigh on these Texans, these voters, these constituents of the president's?
There's uncertainty, even with the carve out for the auto tariffs. There's still an uncertainty about what's going to happen on April. And so how do you plan as a business? How do you plan as a worker, ahead of that? And so it's beyond that too, just as business planning too. It's, even the ramifications are beyond just this particular part of the tariff. I mean, you see in Canada, there's already still tariffs that are kind of being implemented that aren't necessarily being lifted as well. And so it just creates this area of friction and tension and uncertainty.
Yeah, friction and tension that is self-inflicted, Bernadine.
Well, absolutely, but also we're talking about President Trump, but keep in mind those congressional men and women, because they're coming up for a vote before President Trump, and then we keep saying uncertainty. The American people, everyday people, they don't want to live their lives not knowing what they're going to do from 1 hour to the next, and not even to know whether or not they're going to have a job. And I think that, and some of the Republicans are saying, well, this could be short term. How short of a term? Yeah. No one knows. And I think that, the Republicans, if something doesn't happen, it's not going to sit well for them.
We are only 8 weeks into this presidency so far, so a lot more ahead and a lot more coming up on this program as well, including this. When we come back this morning, why are Republicans letting President Trump legislate with executive orders? Congressman Tony Gonzalez with us from San Antonio. And Democrat Julie Johnson at the U.S. Capitol on the cuts that could be coming to Medicaid. Inside Texas Politics, back in a moment. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. Now to these seismic political changes happening in Washington, D.C. Democrats warn that Medicaid will be the next agency to face cuts. Congresswoman Julie Johnson says that could put thousands of Texans at risk. She is a Democrat who represents Dallas. Congresswoman, welcome back to the program here. Democrats are saying Medicaid is at risk. Republicans say it is not. The Congressional Budget Office says there's no way that Republicans can meet their budget target without cutting Medicaid or Medicare. The question right now, do you think that Texans should really be concerned about this, or does politics still have time to play itself out?
I think Texans need to be very, very concerned about Medicaid cuts. Well, in Texas 32 alone, there's over 100,000 people on Medicaid. And in the Dallas area, many, many more. And in Texas, millions. It's really going to affect kids. Our children are going to be hungry. Our children aren't going to get health care that they need. It's amazing that the Republicans want to hurt kids like they do. Our seniors, our nursing homes and long-term care facilities are going to have dramatic impacts. And that's going to really put families in a bind with respect to how they deal with aging loved ones and a myriad of other issues. It's really upsetting and very concerning. And it's something I'm really worried about.
Just before our interview started here, I got word about a bill you filed to strengthen Customs and Border Patrol. And honestly, I did a second look at this. I mean, was this Julie Johnson, a Democrat from Texas? Every time we hear about strengthening the border, it's always coming from Republicans. What do you have in mind with this legislation?
Well, Democrats care about border security, and Democrats can be part of the solution. And I think it's important. The Republicans haven't fixed it. If you'll notice, the Republicans have been in charge in our state for 3 decades, and they haven't fixed anything or done anything. And so, I feel like in my time in the state legislature and in my time up here and meetings that I've had, it's just very clear that we don't have enough personnel in order to effectively and timely process people's applications. And that is really one of the biggest impediments to a safe and secure border. People come here, they have to wait 5 or 6 years for a timely appointment. And we need a fair, fast, and final immigration system. And I campaigned on this issue that I wanted to be part of the solutions. I think we can do it in a very humane way while still, being compassionate to those that are really seeking to live the American dream and be part of our amazing country, but also while having a secure border. They're not mutually exclusive. You can care about the people coming and have a secure border at the same time.
Is your legislation talking about adding more immigration judges, or is it more physical boots on the ground there? I think you talk about in 3 years, at least 2,200 Customs and Border Patrol personnel are going to retire, and the agency is already short almost 6,000.
Right. It's all of the above. Really what it is a study to make sure that the people that we have on the border have the technology they need, the equipment they need, and we have the sufficient personnel that we need. And that includes court personnel and processing and all of the things, just to take a more holistic look at it. Because, at the end of the day, what we have is we have the greatest country, and most people initially in some form immigrated here. And we have a country that should be open to people to be able to come here, but we have a process, and our process needs to be efficient, it needs to be fair, and it needs to be final, where people know that they have a resolution, and we're not just releasing people into this country to have to show back up for a hearing 5 years later. That's not responsible or reasonable to anyone. And I just think we're trying to address some of these systemic problems at the border and try to make it better.
Congresswoman, good to see you. Thank you for the time.
Always a treat. Thank you so much.
Now to new information about President Trump's effort to tighten the border with Mexico there. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told our next guest how this is all going to unfold in the coming years. Congressman Tony Gonzalez is a Republican from San Antonio who represents hundreds of miles of the border with Mexico. Congressman, welcome back to the program. The Vice President, Secretary of Defense, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, all of them accompanied you on a trip to the border the other day. Tell us what the whole point of this was for, and do you think that visit and the new administration's visit down there is really going to change anything at the border after what the president's already done?
Yeah, Jason, thank you for having me. I'm absolutely grateful for the new policy changes that President Trump has led, because in my eyes, this is all of the above, whole of government approach. We all need to be paddling in the same direction. My district, as you know, has been at the epicenter of it. Texas has been impacted by this. So to have so many folks come down and visit, high-level visit like that, I think sends a very clear message to the world that things have changed in the United States.
Considering your extensive military background, are you comfortable having active duty U.S. soldiers deployed to the southern border?
I am. And that was one of the conversations I had with the Secretary of Defense was, hey, what's the long-term plan here, right? I get the initial surge, the shock and awe, if you will, and the whole things have changed. But what's the long-term plan? And one of the things he mentioned to me was, he goes, Tony, this is only phase 1 of 4 phases. So that tells me that there is a long-term plan to sustain this projection that our border is closed from bad actors. And so
what are the other 4 phases? No, I'm sorry, Congressman. What are the other 4 phases?
Essentially, you have an initial flux of people, right, which is happening right now. They're about to surge an entire division, 10,000 people to the border in different forms of fashion. A lot of those expertise are in security and engineering. As I've talking to folks on Fort Bliss and on Laughlin, some of the military bases along the border that are helping this. The other phases will come I think as needed, if you will, or not as needed, but they will be shaped depending on what happens next, right? If the numbers stay low, if there's progress, I think you'll see this. But this is a long-term sustained operation. It's not just a, hey, we're packing it up the end of the month and patting ourselves on the back. I think you're going to see this is the new norm.
President Trump is said to be getting an executive order ready to eliminate the Department of Education. Republicans have been trying to do this for decades, as you know as well. My question, though, is can the president do that with an executive order and not by going through Congress at all? Isn't this a congressional decision to make?
He's certainly going to do his part, and he is not going to wait on Congress. And you know what? I don't blame him, because if you wait on Congress to do anything, you're going to be waiting a very long time, right? And so I think he's plugging away. I do think Congress has a role to play in here. We need to figure out. I'm of the mindset the power needs to get down to the local level, right? It needs to get down to the states, needs to get down to the municipalities. Who knows better for the education for your own children than you? And I also am of the mindset that there are federal programs that work. TRIO works, Pell Grants work. So I have questions. What are some of these federal programs that I think are beneficial? These aren't wasted taxpayer dollars. They are beneficial. Where does that fall into the equation? What happens to those programs that I think have been successful for so many Americans for so long? I think that's what we have to protect. And all the other stuff, we push it down to the states.
I can remember back in 2008 for President Obama, 2016 or 2020 rather for President Biden, they would both issue a flurry of executive orders like we're seeing now. And the Republicans in charge of Congress would always say, listen, you can't legislate through executive orders. That's our job. What do you say to so many people who say that, listen, Congress is ceding authority to the president right here and not doing its job?
Jason, the frustration I have is I'm in year 5 of being in Congress now. And I tell you what, Congress will punt on first down if you give them the opportunity. And they will say it's somebody else's fault but their own, right? And that is very frustrating. It's frustrating to me. It's frustrating to a lot of Americans. I would love for Congress, an equal branch of government, just like our founding fathers meant it to be strong, to go in there and say, no, we want that we align on these agenda items that the American public have voted us in on. But the reality is right now, Congress is as weak as can be. So if the president is going to make some of these changes that are keeping us safe and putting us in the right direction, I'm all about it.
Congressman, always good to see you. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Jason.
The roundtable is ready when we come back here on Inside Texas Politics. All right, time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. The roundtable is back with us, Ian, Bud, and Bernadine. Let's talk about the politics of renewable energy, because once again, Bud, we have seen here that wind and solar are keeping the lights on in Texas, even though they are a great target for Republican state leaders here.
What a great week for renewables in Texas, and all the rest of the nation took notice that Texas was running on wind and solar. It was a week when it was incredibly cold, but there was also really heavy wind. The sun was bright. Wind powered almost half the state's power when we were cold.
And Ian, what happens here? Do state leaders back off since this state needs every single megawatt it can find?
Well, you just look at the words of the governor, who has talked about an all of the above energy approach, and so that's kind of setting the agenda in terms of the approach here, especially as you see more crypto mining, more population growth, extreme weather too. The needs for more energy are going to grow. So that's reflected somewhat in the legislation you see. Although you'll still see certain legislation too around permitting and siting requirements too, but largely, you're not seeing that massive as we may have seen in the past efforts against renewables.
Has it changed, Bernadine? Has the tide changed?
Well, I think the mere fact that Governor Abbott is mentioning it in something for the future shows that because Texas is growing so quickly, and we're having problem with keeping the air on, keeping the heat on. So they need to do something, and I think this is where they're going.
Jason, there's also some jealousy in the rest of the country that Texas has its own grid. This last couple of weeks, we took all this wind and solar and kept it all for ourselves. And
of course, the big news 48 hours ago on Friday, Texas A&M named Glenn Hager, the state comptroller, the state CFO, as the lone finalist for chancellor. Immediately, Bud, we saw Christy Craddock, the railroad commissioner, and former state senator Don Huffines announced that they want to run for that. There hasn't been movement in Austin in years.
Yeah, these are the first, except for George P. Bush stepping down as land commissioner. This
Sure.
is the first top seat that's had any kind of shakeup. Glenn Hagar was pretty much favored for this job, expected to move into this job. People have been angling for comptroller. Christy Craddock and Don Halfines are just the first ones in. Someone from the legislature will jump in.
And you've heard the same rumors I have, and Bud mentioned that Hagar has been a favorite for this for a long time. But a lot of people have been talking for years that, well, Hagar is going to get in line for maybe lieutenant governor if the lieutenant governor decided he didn't want to run again, or for governor. Is Hagar's political career over, do you think?
Possibly, but not necessarily. I mean, this is a great opportunity for him to show leadership on a different level too, and potentially there's there's opportunities in the future for a different office he may pursue. But as Bud said, like in 2026, there's so many statewide offices that are be up for re-election. We are just starting to see just the start of a lot of declarations for different statewides.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, Bernadine. Here we are, just early to mid-March here, and already there's this shuffle going on down there in Austin. Don Huffines, do you think? I mean, he wants to get back into politics. He's stayed into politics, but getting back into elected office.
Well, that's where he wants to go.
Yeah.
And I think they're jumping on this because they're not sure what other office is going to open up, and the lieutenant governor's office might not open up. Or probably won't open up. The governor's office won't open up. So when this office is opening up, that's where the people are going to try to get those offices. But I think, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to see more people jump into this.
Yeah,
because it doesn't open up often.
Jason, Super Tuesday is a year away.
Bud, thanks for the reminder on that, the calendar reminder. Guys, thanks so much. We appreciate it. We're back next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics, and we hope to see you then. Take care.